Get this woman out of my lobby before she causes a scene. Preston Hale looked Dr. Lena Brooks up and down, his smile sharp and cruel. You hear me? This is a corporate headquarters, not a place where anyone can wander in pretending they matter. Dr. Lena Brooks didn't move. I have a meeting with Mr. Shaw. He's expecting me shortly. Adrian doesn't meet with people like you without my permission. The lobby went silent. Security stepped closer, uneasy. Ma'am, please come with me. Dr. Brooks's voice stayed calm. You should call him first. You're making a mistake. Preston stepped toward her. No, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to stop embarrassing yourself, turn around, and leave my building. He leaned closer, smiling. Next time, learn which doors were never meant for you. Preston had no idea Dr. Lena Brooks was the $340 million investor holding his company's last chance. Dr. Lena Brooks stepped through the glass doors of Meridian Technologies, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor of the downtown Chicago headquarters. The lobby stretched before her like a cathedral of corporate power, with gleaming surfaces, soaring ceilings, and the kind of silence that money bought. She carried a slim leather portfolio containing preliminary documents for a $340 million rescue investment, documents that could save this company from collapse. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the pristine space. Dr. Brooks wore a navy suit that fit perfectly, pearl earrings that caught the light, and the quiet confidence of someone who had built her fortune from nothing. She had dressed carefully for this meeting, not to impress, but to remind everyone in the room that respect was not negotiable. At 46, she had learned to read rooms quickly. This lobby told her everything she needed to know about Meridian's culture. Beautiful, but cold. Expensive, but empty. The kind of place where image mattered more than substance. She approached the curved reception desk where a young woman with blonde hair and nervous energy sat behind a computer screen. The nameplate read, Paige Naylor. Paige looked up with the practiced smile of someone trained to be pleasant to important people and dismissive to everyone else. Good morning, Dr. Brooks said, her voice calm and clear. I'm Dr. Lena Brooks. I have a confidential investor meeting with CEO Preston Hale and CFO Adrian Shaw. Paige's fingers flew across the keyboard, her brow furrowing as she searched the appointment system. The smile faded into confusion, then mild irritation. I'm sorry, but I don't see any meetings scheduled under that name. Are you sure you have the right day? Dr. Brooks's expression remained patient. She had expected this. Adrian had warned her the meeting was kept off the public calendar for obvious reasons. A $340 million rescue investment required discretion. The appointment was marked confidential. Could you please call Mr. Shaw's office? Paige's tone shifted, becoming slightly patronizing. Ma'am, all executive meetings go through the system, even confidential ones. Maybe you're thinking of a different company. The Meridian Hotel is about 6 blocks south if I'm in the right place. Dr. Brooks interrupted gently. Please call Adrian Shaw. Before Paige could respond, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. 3 men in expensive suits emerged, their voices carrying across the marble space. The man in the center commanded attention without trying. Tall, silver-haired, wearing confidence like armor. Preston Hale. Dr. Brooks recognized him from the financial magazines, though he looked older in person, more tired around the eyes. Preston was mid-conversation with the 2 executives flanking him, gesturing with the kind of animated authority that came from never being questioned. Told the board we'd have answers by Friday. I don't care what it takes. We deliver. He stopped talking when he noticed Dr. Brooks standing near the executive elevators. His eyes narrowed, scanning her from head to toe with the cold assessment of someone deciding whether she belonged in his space. The calculation took seconds. His conclusion was immediate. Can I help you? The question sounded helpful, but his tone carried an edge, a challenge disguised as courtesy. Dr. Brooks turned to face him fully, maintaining eye contact. I'm Dr. Lena Brooks. I'm here for the investor meeting. Preston's eyebrows shot up, and a laugh escaped before he could stop it. Not a pleasant laugh, the kind that cut. The investor meeting? He glanced at his executives, who shifted uncomfortably. I think there's been some confusion. The investor meeting is private. I understand that, Dr. Brooks replied evenly. I'm Lena Brooks from Brooks Equity Partners. But Preston wasn't listening anymore. His assumption had calcified into certainty. This woman, this black woman in his lobby, could not possibly be the investor his company desperately needed. The mathematics of his prejudice were simple and absolute. Look, I don't know what game you're playing here, Preston said, his voice ringing slightly. Several employees had emerged from side corridors, drawn by the unusual tension in their normally quiet lobby. Phones began lifting discreetly. But you can't just walk into a Fortune 500 company and pretend to be someone important. Dr. Brooks felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in her chest, but her voice remained steady. Mr. Hale, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Preston cut her off, is you thinking you can bluff your way upstairs. He turned toward the security desk where Theo Grant stood, watching with growing unease. Theo was a former military police officer, disciplined and observant. Something about this confrontation felt wrong to him, but orders were orders. The lobby had gone completely silent now. Even Paige had stopped typing. Everyone could feel the electricity in the air. The moment when power and prejudice collided with consequences neither side could predict. Preston pointed directly at Dr. Brooks, his finger cutting through the space between them like a blade. Get her out before she causes trouble. Theo Grant felt his stomach tighten as he stepped away from the security desk. His black leather shoes made soft sounds against the marble floor as he approached Dr. Brooks. 23 years of military service had taught him to follow orders, but something about this situation made his instincts scream warnings. The woman standing near the executive elevators carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that came from real power, not pretense. Ma'am, Theo said softly, his voice respectful but firm. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. Dr. Brooks turned to face him, and he saw no panic in her dark eyes, only disappointment. Mr. Hale, she said, speaking past Theo to address Preston directly, you are making a serious mistake. The words hung in the air like a final warning, but Preston was too deep into his performance now, too invested in demonstrating his authority in front of his staff. His face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. Having this woman, this intruder, speak to him with such calm certainty only made him more furious. A mistake? Preston's voice echoed off the marble walls. The only mistake is you thinking you can walk into my building and lie about who you are. He gestured wildly at the gathering employees. This is trespassing, pure and simple. You're pretending to be important, and I won't tolerate it. More staff members had emerged from the elevator banks and side corridors, drawn by the commotion. They clustered near the massive marble columns that supported the lobby's soaring ceiling, their faces a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Several younger employees had their phones out, recording the confrontation with a nervous excitement. The corporate hierarchy they lived within made choosing sides dangerous, so they watched in silence. Paige, behind the reception desk, stared down at her computer screen, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She could feel the weight of her earlier dismissive treatment of this woman pressing down on her shoulders, but speaking up now would mean contradicting her CEO in front of everyone. The risk was too great. She kept her eyes lowered and said nothing. Theo placed a gentle hand on Dr. Brooks's arm just above her elbow. His touch was professional, careful, the contact of a man who understood the difference between necessary force and brutality. Ma'am, please don't make this harder than it has to be. But Preston wasn't satisfied with gentle. He barked across the lobby, his voice sharp with command. Grant, she's a security threat. Treat her like one. The words hit Theo like a slap. In the military, he had been trained to assess real threats. This composed woman in her tailored navy suit posed no danger to anyone except perhaps Preston's ego, but direct orders from the CEO in front of witnesses left him no choice. He tightened his grip on Dr. Brooks's arm. Dr. Brooks felt the change immediately. The respectful escort had become something harder, more forceful. But she refused to beg. She had built a fortune by never surrendering her dignity, and she would not start now. "I was invited here," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the marble expanse. "Adrian Shaw arranged this meeting. He can confirm my identity and my appointment." Preston let out a harsh laugh that made several employees flinch. "Adrian Shaw? Our CFO?" He shook his head in mock disbelief. "Adrian would never arrange a meeting with someone like you without my knowledge." Nice try. The phrase "someone like you" landed with brutal precision. Everyone in the lobby understood exactly what he meant. The subtext became text. The implication became accusation. Dr. Brooks's race, her presence, her very existence in this space had been reduced to a stereotype. In Preston's mind, Theo began walking Dr. Brooks toward the front doors, his training warring with his conscience. Each step felt heavier than the last. Behind them, Preston's voice grew more triumphant, feeding off the audience he had created. "Get her out of here before she tries another story," Preston commanded. "And Grant, call the police. I want her charged with trespassing." The elevator chimed softly, then its doors burst open like an explosion. Adrian Shaw rushed out in complete panic. Adrian Shaw burst from the elevator like a man fleeing a burning building. His usually perfect silver hair was disheveled. His tie askew and a manila folder clutched against his chest was spilling papers across the marble floor. His face was flushed red with panic and exertion. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Everyone, stop right now!" The entire lobby froze. Theo's hand remained on Dr. Brooks's arm, but his grip loosened instinctively. Employees who had been watching the drama unfold stood motionless, their phones still recording. Even Preston turned toward his CFO with a mixture of confusion and irritation. Adrian stumbled forward, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to reach them. More papers scattered from his folder, financial projections and investment documents floating down like fallen leaves. His chest heaved as he struggled to catch his breath. "She's our investor," Adrian shouted, pointing directly at Dr. Brooks. "She's Dr. Lena Brooks. She's the $340 million investor we've been waiting for." The words hit the lobby like a physical force. Complete silence fell over the space, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Chicago traffic outside the glass walls. Preston's confident smirk vanished from his face as if it had been surgically removed. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again without sound. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale and suddenly smaller than he had appeared moments before. Around the lobby, employees began to understand what they had just witnessed. The woman their CEO had ordered, dragged out by security, was the same woman who held the power to save their jobs, their health care benefits, their mortgages, their children's college funds. The investor whose money could prevent layoffs and keep their company from collapse had been publicly humiliated in front of them all. Some employees covered their mouths in shock. Others looked down at their phones, realizing they had recorded their CEO's career suicide in real time. The two executives who had been standing behind Preston took subtle steps backward, distancing themselves from the disaster. Adrian reached Dr. Brooks and Theo, his breathing still ragged. "Dr. Brooks, I am so deeply sorry. I am so incredibly sorry." He looked at Theo with pleading eyes. Please let her go immediately." Theo released Dr. Brooks's arm as if it had become electrified. He stepped back, his professional composure intact, but his eyes troubled. He had been ordered to treat a billionaire investor like a common criminal. Adrian turned back to Dr. Brooks, his hands shaking as he tried to gather the scattered papers. "Your appointment was kept off the public calendar for confidentiality reasons. The merger talks, the investment details, we couldn't risk any leaks to the market before the announcement. That's why the reception desk didn't have your name. That's why security wasn't informed. Dr. Brooks stood perfectly still, her composure unbroken despite everything that had happened. Her navy suit remained immaculate, her leather portfolio still clutched in her free hand, her pearl earrings catching the lobby's recessed lighting. But her dark eyes held something new now, a cold assessment that made several watching employees shiver. She looked directly at Preston, who remained frozen near the marble pillars like a statue of his former confidence. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the silent lobby, each word precise and devastating. The problem was not the calendar, Mr. Hale. The problem was that you never asked who I was. Preston's mouth worked silently for several seconds before he managed to speak. Dr. Brooks, this is just a terrible misunderstanding. A communication breakdown between departments. These things happen in large organizations. No, Dr. Brooks said, her voice cutting through his excuses like a blade. A misunderstanding is when someone gets directions wrong. This was a decision. You looked at me and decided I didn't belong here. You decided I was lying. You decided I was a threat. You made those choices without asking a single question. Adrian continued gathering papers from the floor, his movements frantic and apologetic. Dr. Brooks, please, we can go upstairs immediately. The boardroom is ready. The contracts are prepared. We can handle this situation properly. Preston stepped forward, forcing what he clearly hoped was a charming smile. Absolutely. Let's put this unfortunate incident behind us and focus on the incredible partnership we're building together. Dr. Brooks remained motionless for a long moment, studying Preston's face. The entire lobby held its breath, waiting for her decision. Would she walk away? Would she cancel the investment that could save thousands of jobs? Would she let Preston's prejudice destroy everything? Finally, she spoke again, her voice steady and controlled. I will continue with this meeting, but not because I accept your apology, Mr. Hale, and not because I'm willing to pretend this didn't happen. She paused, letting her words sink in. I'm going upstairs because there are thousands of workers and dozens of hospitals that depend on the stability this investment can provide. I will not let your behavior punish them. Adrian nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Brooks. The elevator is right here. Dr. Brooks walked toward the elevator with the same composed dignity she had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. Adrian rushed ahead to press the call button, still clutching his scattered papers and shooting grateful glances in her direction. As the elevator doors opened, Dr. Brooks stepped inside with Adrian. Preston followed behind them, his forced smile tight and brittle, fury burning behind his eyes despite his attempt to appear gracious. The doors began to close on a lobby full of stunned employees and one security guard who was questioning every order he had ever followed. The elevator climbed silently to the 32nd floor, its polished walls reflecting the tension between the three occupants. Adrian clutched his papers, stealing nervous glances at Dr. Brooks. Preston stared straight ahead, his jaw tight with barely contained anger. Dr. Brooks watched the floor numbers change, her expression unreadable. When the doors opened, they stepped into a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. Adrian led them toward massive oak doors at the end of the corridor. The executive boardroom, he said quietly. Everyone is waiting. Inside, the room commanded attention with its gleaming conference table, leather chairs, and walls displaying awards and corporate achievements. 5 people sat around the table, their faces tense with anticipation. At the head sat Eleanor Crane, the board chair, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a perfect chignon and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Brooks, Eleanor said, rising gracefully. Welcome to Meridian Technologies. We are so pleased you could join us today. Dr. Brooks shook hands with each board member as Adrian made introductions. Their names blurred together, directors of marketing, operations, legal affairs, but their expressions were identical. Desperate hope mixed with barely concealed panic. Preston took his seat at the opposite end of the table from Eleanor, gesturing for Dr. Brooks to sit to his right. She chose a chair across from him instead, placing her leather portfolio on the polished surface. "Before we begin," Preston said, his voice smooth and practiced, "I want to address the unfortunate confusion in our lobby today. Dr. Brooks, please accept my sincere apologies for the miscommunication regarding your arrival. Our security protocols are designed to protect our proprietary information and ensure confidentiality for high-level meetings like this one. Sometimes those procedures can create awkward situations for our valued partners." The directors nodded along, their relief visible as Preston delivered what sounded like a reasonable explanation. Eleanor watched Dr. Brooks's face carefully, searching for signs of acceptance or forgiveness. Dr. Brooks said nothing. She opened her portfolio and removed a single sheet of paper, placing it face down on the table. Adrian cleared his throat. "Dr. Brooks, let me outline our current situation so you understand the urgency of this partnership." He activated a wall-mounted display showing charts and financial projections. "Our healthcare platform serves 43 hospitals across 7 states. The software manages patient records, treatment protocols, and medication tracking for over 200,000 people. The numbers painted a grim picture. Revenue had dropped 30% in 6 months. The latest software update had created system failures that frustrated doctors and endangered patient care. Hospitals were threatening to cancel contracts. Lenders were demanding immediate debt payments. We have until Friday to provide proof of new capital injection," Adrian continued, his voice strained. "Without your investment, we face bankruptcy proceedings within 2 weeks." One of the directors leaned forward. "Dr. Brooks, thousands of jobs are at stake, not just here, but in every hospital that depends on our platform. Nurses, technicians, administrators, they all need us to stay operational." Eleanor clasped her hands together. "We understand this is a significant commitment on your part, but time is absolutely critical. Our legal team has prepared all necessary documents for your signature today." The room fell silent as everyone waited for Dr. Brooks to respond. Preston's smile was confident, but his eyes were cold. Adrian looked like a man watching his life's work crumble. The directors sat frozen, barely breathing. Dr. Brooks finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. "I understand the urgency. I also understand that desperate companies sometimes hide problems from potential investors." She turned over the paper she had placed on the table. "Before I release $340 million, I require a 72-hour independent review." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What kind of review?" Eleanor asked carefully. "Financial audit, executive conduct examination, investigation of any retaliation complaints filed against company leadership." Dr. Brooks looked directly at Preston. "If this company is as healthy as you claim, transparency should be welcome." Preston's composure cracked slightly. "Dr. Brooks, with respect, we don't have 72 hours. Our lenders won't wait. The market won't wait. Every day we delay is another hospital that might switch to our competitors. Then you should have considered that before having me dragged through your lobby like a criminal." Dr. Brooks replied evenly. Adrian's face showed a flicker of relief. Someone was finally demanding accountability. But Eleanor looked alarmed, calculating the risks of delayed funding against the dangers of outside scrutiny. "Surely we can address any concerns through internal channels," Eleanor suggested. "Our compliance department maintains excellent records. Our HR policies exceed industry standards." "I'm sure they do," Dr. Brooks said. "So proving it shouldn't be difficult." Preston leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. "You're asking us to risk everything on a fishing expedition. We need commitment, not conditions. We need partnership, not interrogation." "You need my money," Dr. Brooks said simply. "And a company that desperately needs my money should be transparent enough to earn it." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Adrian stared at his papers, afraid to meet anyone's eyes. The directors exchanged worried glances. Eleanor's fingers drummed silently against the table. Finally, Preston forced another smile. Of course, transparency is important. We can certainly arrange some level of review, though 72 hours seems excessive for a company of our reputation. My reputation was also excellent until today, Dr. Brooks replied. Yet that didn't stop you from assuming I was a threat to be removed. She stood, closing her portfolio with a decisive snap. You have my terms. When you're ready to meet them, Mr. Shaw has my contact information. As Dr. Brooks walked toward the boardroom doors, a young woman stepped out from behind a column near the hallway entrance. She was professionally dressed, carrying a tablet with nervous energy that suggested she had been waiting for this exact moment. Dr. Brooks, the woman said quietly, I'm Maya Ellison, junior executive assistant. Could I speak with you alone? Maya glanced over her shoulder before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. What happened downstairs wasn't new. It was just the first time it happened to someone they couldn't afford to ignore. Doctor. Brooks studied the young woman carefully. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her tablet, but her eyes held a determination that reminded Dr. Brooks of herself 20 years ago. Tell me, Dr. Brooks said simply. Maya looked down the hallway again, making sure they were alone. 3 months ago, a man from accounting questioned some vendor payments that didn't make sense. 2 weeks later, his performance review was suddenly full of problems that never existed before. He was demoted to a junior position and transferred to a different floor. She swiped her tablet screen, showing Dr. Brooks a screenshot. This is the original review his supervisor wrote, glowing. And this is the one that went into his file after he asked questions about the money. The difference was stark. The second review contained criticisms that contradicted the first entirely. How did you get both versions? Dr. Brooks asked. I keep backups of everything I handle, Maya said. I learned early that powerful people deny everything unless you have proof. She scrolled to another screen. A woman from HR filed a complaint about executives making jokes about her accent during meetings. The complaint disappeared from the system 3 days later. When she asked about it, she was told there was no record of any filing. Dr. Brooks felt her jaw tighten. But you have the original. I photographed it before it vanished. Maya's voice grew stronger. Dr. Brooks, there are dozens of these cases. Older workers suddenly getting impossible assignments. Black employees having their ideas credited to white colleagues. Anyone who speaks up gets labeled as not a culture fit. The hallway felt smaller as the weight of systematic abuse became clear. This wasn't one CEO having a bad day. This was institutional poison. There's more, Maya continued, pulling up an email thread. Yesterday morning, before you arrived, Preston sent a message to his senior staff. He said a major investor named Brooks was coming, but he called your investment group desperate money from people who don't understand our business. Dr. Brooks's composure remained steady, but inside anger burned cold and bright. Maya scrolled further. He also wrote this. Some diversity hire probably set up the meeting thinking they could play in the big leagues. Adrian needs to handle this quickly so we can get back to real business. The email was time-stamped 2 hours before Dr. Brooks had walked into the lobby. He knew, Dr. Brooks said quietly. He knew someone named Brooks was the investor. He just couldn't imagine it might actually be you. Maya met Dr. Brooks's eyes. To him, successful black women don't exist unless they're serving coffee or cleaning offices. Dr. Brooks absorbed this revelation in silence. The lobby humiliation hadn't been a mistake or misunderstanding. It had been the natural result of assumptions so deep, Preston couldn't see past them even when his company's survival depended on it. Why are you showing me this? Dr. Brooks asked. Because what happened to you happens to us every day. The only difference is we can't walk away with $300 million. Maya's voice wavered slightly. If you expose him, maybe the rest of us get a chance to breathe. This could cost you your job, Dr. Brooks warned. Staying quiet already cost me my dignity, Maya replied, and if this company collapses because Preston drove away the one person who could save it, I'll lose my job anyway. Meanwhile, 7 floors above, Preston paced behind his mahogany desk while his inner circle sat in uncomfortable silence. His chief of staff, David Park, watched nervously as the CEO's face grew redder with each step. "The lobby video needs to disappear," Preston snapped. "All copies, security cameras, phones, everything. I don't care what it costs." "Sir," David said carefully, "deleting evidence could create legal problems." "Legal problems?" Preston's voice rose. "That woman is the legal problem. She thinks she can waltz in here and humiliate me in front of my own employees?" Marketing Director Sandra Hayes shifted in her chair. "The investment would stabilize our debt situation. Maybe we should focus on smoothing things over rather than—" "She doesn't get to demand audits and reviews like she owns this place," Preston cut her off. "I built this company. I decide who gets access. I decide who belongs." He turned to face the group. "Find out who talked to her after the meeting. Someone gave her information. Someone is feeding her ammunition to use against us." David made notes reluctantly. "What about the 72-hour review she requested?" "Stall her. Tell her we're considering it while we arrange alternative financing. Make her think she has leverage while we find another way forward." Preston's smile was cold. "By the time she realizes what's happening, we won't need her money anymore." HR Director Patricia Bell spoke up. "Sir, if she's recorded any evidence of discrimination, federal investigators might—" "There is no discrimination," Preston said sharply. "There are high standards and people who can't meet them. There's a difference." He walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the street below. In the marble lobby, Dr. Brooks shook Maya's hand and walked calmly toward the front doors. Her steps were measured, her expression composed. But everyone who watched could sense the shift in power. Theo nodded respectfully as she passed his security desk. Paige looked up from her computer with nervous guilt. Several employees paused their conversations to watch. Dr. Brooks pushed through the glass doors without looking back. From his window, Preston watched her climb into a black town car. His reflection stared back at him, distorted by the afternoon light. He placed his palm against the cool glass and whispered, "She will not take my company." That same evening, Dr. Brooks returned to her hotel suite overlooking downtown Chicago and received calls from concerned partners. The 32nd floor suite offered a panoramic view of the city's glittering skyline, but Dr. Brooks barely noticed the lights reflecting off Lake Michigan as her phone buzzed continuously on the marble coffee table. Her business partner, Michael Torres, called first. "Dr. Brooks, have you seen the Chicago Business Journal website?" His voice carried tension she rarely heard from the normally calm attorney. "There's a story about your meeting today." Dr. Brooks pulled up the article on her laptop. The headline made her jaw tighten. "Investor disrupts private meeting, makes hostile demands at healthcare tech giant." She read aloud. "Sources close to Meridian Technologies report that Dr. Lena Brooks of Brooks Equity Partners disrupted a scheduled corporate meeting, making aggressive financial demands and threatening company leadership when security attempted to resolve a scheduling misunderstanding." "This is complete fiction," Dr. Brooks said quietly. "The article claims you became confrontational when asked to provide proper identification," Michael continued. "It says you demanded immediate access to confidential financial records and threatened to withdraw funding unless given unprecedented control over company operations." Dr. Brooks scrolled through the story. Every detail had been twisted. Her calm request for identification became aggressive demands. Preston's humiliation became a scheduling misunderstanding. Her ethical review request became a hostile takeover attempt. Her phone rang again. Patricia Williams from the Teachers' Pension Fund. "Dr. Brooks, we're getting calls from reporters asking about your investment strategy. Someone leaked that you're involved with Meridian. The coverage makes it sound like you're forcing your way into companies that don't want your involvement." Another call, another concerned partner, another investor questioning whether Dr. Brooks's reputation could damage their shared portfolios. By 9 o'clock, she had fielded 12 calls from allies who believed her but worried about perception in the financial press. "They're rewriting the story before anyone can verify what really happened," she told Michael during their final call of the evening. "Preston is covering his tracks while the evidence is still fresh." Across town at Meridian headquarters, Preston stood in Eleanor Crane's corner office on the 28th floor. The board chair poured herself a glass of wine while reviewing the online coverage. "The article presents our side professionally," Eleanor said, though her voice lacked conviction. "But attacking a major investor carries risks, Preston, if this backfires." "She's not a major investor," Preston interrupted. "She's an opportunist who saw our temporary difficulties and decided to exploit them." "The woman walked into our building making demands like she already owned us." Eleanor studied his face. "Adrian says her financing would stabilize our debt within 60 days. Adrian doesn't understand business strategy. He sees numbers on spreadsheets, not the bigger picture." Preston moved to the windows overlooking the Chicago River. "Dr. Brooks wants control, not partnership. She demanded audits, reviews, personnel changes. That's not investment. That's conquest. The board needs stability. Preston, our stock price dropped 8% this week alone, which is exactly why we can't let her dictate terms. If word spreads that we're so desperate we'll accept hostile conditions from any investor who shows up, every vulture in the market will circle us." Eleanor set down her wine glass. "What are you proposing?" "Alternative financing. I have contacts at 3 private equity firms. We can structure a deal that protects our independence and avoids her ultimatums." 2 floors below, Adrian Shaw sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports when Preston appeared in his doorway. "We need to discuss the Brooks situation," Preston said, closing the door behind him. Adrian looked up wearily. "She's offering exactly what we need, Preston. $340 million in immediate capital with reasonable terms. Why are we fighting this? Because reasonable terms don't include demands for executive removals and company-wide audits." Preston sat across from Adrian's desk. "She's using our financial pressure to force changes that have nothing to do with investment returns. Maybe some changes are overdue." Preston's expression hardened. "That sounds dangerously close to disloyalty, Adrian. I hope you remember who approved your position here." Adrian felt the familiar knot in his stomach that came whenever Preston issued veiled threats. "I'm thinking about the company's survival. Then think about this. If you undermine my authority during these negotiations, I'll remember that when we restructure executive positions next quarter." The message was clear. Support Preston, or lose everything. After Preston left, Adrian stared at the financial projections on his monitor. Without Dr. Brooks's investment, the company would face bankruptcy within 90 days. With it, they could stabilize and grow. But Preston seemed more concerned with winning than surviving. Meanwhile, Theo Grant sat in his apartment kitchen, still wearing his security uniform from the afternoon shift. His wife Carmen was upstairs resting after her 3rd physical therapy session following knee surgery. His phone buzzed with a text from David Park, Preston's chief of staff. "Need to see you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Building security office. Important." At 7:30 the next morning, Theo entered the small security office on the 2nd floor of Meridian headquarters. David Park waited with a manila folder and a serious expression. "This is about yesterday's incident in the lobby," David said without preamble. "We need to document exactly what happened for our legal team." He opened the folder and pulled out a typed statement. "This is a standard report form. I need you to read it and sign at the bottom." Theo read slowly. "Security Incident Report. Dr. Lena Brooks refused to provide identification when requested by reception staff. Subject became agitated when asked to wait and demanded immediate access to executive offices. When security attempted to verify her appointment, subject raised her voice and made threatening statements about company leadership. Security escort was necessary to maintain lobby safety and professional atmosphere." Every word was a lie. Theo looked up. "This isn't what happened. It's what our legal team needs for documentation purposes. The exact details aren't as important as protecting the company from liability claims." She identified herself clearly. She wasn't agitated. She didn't raise her voice or make threats. David's tone hardened. "Theo, Your job here provides health insurance for your wife's recovery. Your pension is tied to 15 years of service. I'd hate to see administrative issues affect your employment record. Theo stared at the false statement, knowing his signature could ruin an innocent woman. The next morning, Maya Ellison swiped her badge at the Meridian entrance and felt a moment of relief when the turnstile clicked open. At least they hadn't fired her overnight. But when she reached her desk on the 15th floor and opened her laptop, the screen displayed a message that made her stomach drop. Account access restricted. Contact IT support for assistance. She tried logging into the company email system. Same message. The file servers where she kept her documentation blocked. Maya walked quickly to the IT help desk, trying to appear calm while her pulse hammered in her ears. "My login isn't working this morning," she told the senior technician. The technician typed her employee ID into his system and frowned. "Shows here that your account is under security review. Should be temporary." "Security review for what?" "Doesn't say. You'll need to talk to HR." 20 minutes later, Maya sat across from the HR director in a windowless conference room that smelled like industrial carpet and anxiety. "This is just routine," the HR director explained, not making eye contact. "We're auditing access permissions across several departments. Your account will be restored once the review is complete." "How long will that take?" "Hard to say. Could be a few days, maybe longer." Maya knew this was retaliation for talking to Dr. Brooks. The timing was too convenient. "Is this related to the investor meeting yesterday?" The HR director's expression tightened. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you know exactly what you mean. Maya, I'd recommend focusing on your current assignments rather than speculating about company business that doesn't concern you." Back at her desk, Maya pulled out her personal phone and texted Dr. Brooks. "My computer access is blocked. They're calling it a security audit, but files may be disappearing. Can you help?" The response came within 5 minutes. "My attorney is driving over now. Don't delete anything from your personal devices. Save everything you can legally." Across town, Theo Grant stared at the false statement David Park had placed in front of him. The lies felt like acid on the page. "I'm not signing this," Theo said quietly. David's friendly mask dropped completely. "Let me be more direct. Your wife needs those physical therapy sessions, right? Expensive treatments. And your pension after 15 years of service? That's your retirement security." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality. Administrative issues can affect employment records. Performance concerns can impact benefit eligibility. These things happen when employees don't support company interests." Theo thought about his wife upstairs in bed, still recovering from surgery. The medical bills, the mortgage, 15 years of steady work that could disappear if he made the wrong choice. But he also thought about the dignity in Dr. Brooks's eyes as she was dragged through the lobby. The quiet way she had refused to beg or make a scene. "She didn't do anything wrong," he said. "That's not the point. The point is protecting this company from legal liability. Your signature shows you're a team player." Theo pushed the paper back across the desk. "Find another way to protect the company." At the downtown offices of Brooks Equity Partners, Adrian Shaw slipped through the reception area like a man sneaking into confession. He carried a thin folder containing financial summaries he had carefully extracted from the company's confidential records. Dr. Brooks's assistant led him into her office, where she sat behind a glass desk reviewing documents with her attorney, Nadine Porter. "Adrian," Dr. Brooks said without warmth, "you look nervous." "I have reason to be." He placed the folder on her desk. "These are high-level financial overviews. Nothing that violates confidentiality agreements, but enough to show you what we're dealing with." Nadine examined the papers. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with silver hair and the demeanor of someone who had spent decades fighting corporate misconduct. "Interesting," she said. "Your debt structure shows some unusual vendor relationships. These consulting fees seem inflated." Adrian's hands trembled slightly. "There are irregularities that the board hasn't been fully briefed on." "Such as?" "Preston has been moving money through shell contracts. Some of the crisis we're facing isn't just market pressure, It's been accelerated by questionable spending decisions. Dr. Brooks leaned forward. Are you saying he's been stealing? I'm saying the books don't match what the board thinks they approved. Nadine made notes on a legal pad. We'll need documentation for the independent review team. They arrived this morning, Adrian said. Preston is furious. He's been screaming at department heads all day, demanding to know who authorized outside auditors to access company files. Back at Meridian headquarters, the independent review team had set up operations in a conference room on the 20th floor. Led by forensic accountant Patricia Hayes, the team methodically worked through financial records while employees whispered nervously in hallways. Maya managed to intercept Nadine Porter near the elevators. I'm Maya Ellison. Dr. Brooks said you were coming. Ms. Porter, I understand you have documentation we need to preserve. I forwarded key emails to my personal legal counsel this morning before my access was completely locked. Performance reviews that were altered. Messages showing retaliation against employees who complained. Evidence of the pattern Dr. Brooks experienced. Smart thinking. We'll coordinate with your counsel to ensure everything is properly protected. As they spoke, Preston emerged from the elevator with his chief of staff. He saw Maya talking to an unfamiliar woman in a business suit, and his expression darkened. Ms. Ellison, he called out sharply. I need to see you in my office now. Nadine handed Maya her card. Call me if you need legal support. In Preston's office, the CEO paced behind his desk like a caged animal. Who was that woman you were speaking with? A visitor. Don't lie to me. I know Dr. Brooks sent lawyers into this building. I wouldn't know about that. Preston slammed his palm on the desk. You think you're clever, don't you? Feeding information to outsiders, undermining this company's leadership. I haven't done anything wrong. You've done everything wrong. He picked up his phone and dialed security. I need an escort to remove Maya Ellison from the premises immediately. An hour later, as the sun set behind the Chicago skyline, Maya walked slowly through the lobby carrying a small cardboard box containing her personal items. 2 security guards flanked her, just as they had flanked Dr. Brooks 24 hours earlier. Employees gathered near the marble columns, watching in fearful silence. Some held phones but were too intimidated to record. Paige, the receptionist, kept her eyes fixed on her computer screen, unable to look at another woman being humiliated in the same space. Theo stood by the front entrance, his jaw tight with anger. When Maya reached the doors, he spoke quietly. This isn't right. Maya looked back at him with tired eyes. No, it isn't. As the glass doors closed behind her, Maya pulled out her phone and called Dr. Brooks. They threw me out, she said simply, just like they did to you. That evening, Dr. Brooks sat across from 3 people in a private conference room at the Palmer House Hotel. The mahogany table was covered with financial documents, laptops, and legal pads filled with notes. Patricia Hayes, the forensic accountant, adjusted her reading glasses and pointed to a series of highlighted transactions on her laptop screen. These payments caught my attention immediately. Large sums moving through consulting vendors, but the work descriptions are vague. Adrian leaned forward, his face pale. I approved some of those. Preston said they were emergency consulting fees to stabilize the software platform. The problem is the recipients, Patricia continued. 3 different vendor names, but they all trace back to the same registered address. A shell company called Northbridge Consulting Solutions. Nadine Porter looked up from her legal pad. Northbridge? That name appeared in the emails Maya preserved. Preston mentioned it in private messages to his chief of staff. Dr. Brooks studied the financial timeline. How much money are we talking about? Over the past 6 months, approximately $12 million, all routed through these fake consulting contracts. Patricia scrolled through additional screens. The board never approved these payments individually. They were buried in broader emergency spending authorizations. Adrian ran his hands through his gray hair. I knew we had cash flow problems. I knew the software launch was bleeding money, but I didn't know funds were being diverted. The pattern suggests systematic fraud, Nadine said. Money moves out through fake vendors, while the company claims it needs emergency investment to survive. Patricia pulled up another document. This is where it gets worse. The consulting contracts all include language about intellectual property transfer and asset liquidation. If Meridian defaults on these payments, the vendors have legal claim to company patents. The room fell silent. He's setting up a trap, Doctor, Brooks said quietly. Create fake debt. Claim the company is desperate, then use that debt to seize valuable assets when it collapses. Adrian stared at the evidence in front of him. Preston told me we were fighting to keep the company alive, but he was planning to gut it all along. Across town in her Lincoln Park penthouse, Eleanor Crane paced beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Her phone had been ringing for 2 hours with calls from panicked board members. The stock dropped 8% after that leaked article. Board member Robert Kim said through the speaker. Investors are asking questions about leadership stability. I understand the concern, Eleanor replied, but we have to be careful not to make hasty decisions based on one incident. One incident? A potential investor was nearly arrested in our lobby. The optics are terrible. Another voice joined the call. Board member Susan Martinez. Is it true Brooks is demanding an investigation before she releases funds? She wants a brief review period. It's not unusual for investments of this magnitude. Brief? The market doesn't wait for internal reviews, Eleanor. We need capital now, or we lose credibility with our remaining creditors. Before Eleanor could respond, her assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Crane, Mr. Hale is here. He says it's urgent. Preston entered Eleanor's living room with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. He carried a leather folder and wore the smile that had charmed boards and investors for years. I have good news, he announced. I've secured alternative financing. Eleanor ended the conference call and turned to face him. Alternative to Brooks? Northbridge Capital. They specialize in healthcare technology turnarounds. They can provide the same level of funding without the delays and conditions Brooks is demanding. I've never heard of Northbridge Capital. They're a private firm, very discreet. They understand that speed matters more than bureaucratic reviews. Preston placed the folder on her coffee table. They're prepared to sign tomorrow morning. Eleanor opened the folder and scanned the term sheet. The numbers looked impressive, but something felt wrong. This seems too convenient, Preston. A major private equity firm appears overnight just when we need them. That's how business works when you have relationships. Northbridge has been watching our company for months. They see the value that Dr. Brooks is too paranoid to appreciate. What about the review she's conducting? We cancel it. We announce the Northbridge partnership and move forward. The market responds positively, our creditors relax, and we avoid the spectacle of having an outsider investigate our internal operations. Eleanor studied Preston's face. He looked confident, but there was something desperate beneath the polish. And if Brooks objects, she can object all she wants, but if we have funding secured, her opinion becomes irrelevant. Back at the Palmer house, Dr. Brooks stared at the evidence Patricia had compiled. The shell companies, the fake consulting contracts, the hidden debt arrangements. It all pointed to one devastating conclusion. She looked directly at Adrian. Your CEO isn't trying to save this company. He's preparing to strip it. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the Meridian lobby, casting long shadows across the marble floor where Dr. Brooks had been humiliated just days earlier. Now, Preston Hale stood in the exact same spot, facing a small crowd of financial reporters and camera crews. He wore his best navy suit and his most confident smile. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that Meridian Technologies has secured emergency financing through our partnership with Northbridge Capital, Preston said into the cluster of microphones. This investment will stabilize our operations, protect jobs, and ensure our healthcare platforms continue serving hospitals nationwide. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune raised her hand. What about Dr. Lena Brooks's investment offer? Sources say she was conducting a review of your company. Preston's smile never wavered. Dr. Brooks presented certain terms that would have delayed critical funding while our creditors and patients waited. Northbridge Capital understands that in healthcare technology, speed saves lives. Another reporter called out, "Is it true there was an incident in this lobby involving Dr. Brooks? There was a miscommunication about scheduling that was quickly resolved. Dr. Brooks was treated with complete professionalism." Preston gestured to the lobby around him. "As you can see, this is a welcoming space for all legitimate visitors." The reporters scribbled notes. Several nodded approvingly at Preston's composed responses. From the upper floors, employees pressed against the windows to watch the press conference. Their faces showed defeat rather than relief. Many had hoped Dr. Brooks's investigation would change things. Now it seemed their CEO had outmaneuvered her completely. Maya Ellison watched from the street outside, no longer able to enter the building. She pulled out her phone and called Dr. Brooks. "He's announcing the Northbridge deal, right where he humiliated you," she said quietly. "The reporters are eating it up." In her hotel suite, Dr. Brooks listened to the press conference through a live stream while Nadine Porter sat across from her with a laptop open. Dr. Brooks was treated with complete professionalism. Preston's voice echoed from the phone speakers. Dr. Brooks's expression remained calm. She had learned long ago not to waste energy on anger when precision was more powerful. Her phone rang. Preston's number appeared on the screen. She answered without greeting. "I trust you're watching the announcement," Preston said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Northbridge is prepared to sign this afternoon. Your services are no longer needed." "I see. You may exit these negotiations properly this time, through the front door, like a professional." Dr. Brooks said nothing for several seconds. Preston clearly expected her to rage or beg. Instead, she spoke in the same measured tone she had used in the lobby. "Mr. Hale, I appreciate you calling to update me personally. I wanted to be courteous." "That's thoughtful. I assume the board has reviewed Northbridge's complete terms? The board trusts my judgment on strategic partnerships." "Of course they do." Dr. Brooks paused. "Enjoy your press conference." She hung up. Nadine looked up from her laptop. "He sounds confident." "Confidence isn't the same as competence." Dr. Brooks walked to the window overlooking the city. "What did Patricia find about Northbridge's ownership structure?" "It's buried under layers of shell companies, but she's tracing the connections." "Give her another 2 hours." "We don't have 2 hours if they're signing this afternoon." Dr. Brooks's phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. "Emergency, can you meet? Have Northbridge draft terms. It's worse than we thought." She showed the message to Nadine. "Call Patricia. Tell her to work faster and get our car ready." 30 minutes later, Adrian met Dr. Brooks in the parking garage beneath a downtown law firm. He looked pale and carried a manila folder that shook slightly in his hands. "I accessed the draft agreement through the board portal," he said without preamble. "Northbridge isn't rescuing us. They're dismantling us." He opened the folder and spread the papers across the hood of Dr. Brooks's car. The terms were devastating. Northbridge would acquire all of Meridian's healthcare patents for 20 cents on the dollar. They would immediately lay off 60% of the workforce. The remaining operations would be sold to competitors within 6 months. Most shocking of all, Preston would receive a $40 million exit package for facilitating the transition. "He's not saving the company," Adrian whispered. "He's being paid to destroy it." Dr. Brooks studied the numbers. Thousands of jobs would vanish. Hospitals relying on Meridian software would lose support. Patients would suffer while Preston walked away rich. "Does Eleanor know these terms?" "I sent them to her an hour ago. She called me twice, but I haven't answered. She's probably panicking." Dr. Brooks's phone rang. Eleanor Crane appeared on the caller ID. She answered. "Dr. Brooks, we need to talk immediately," Eleanor said, her usually controlled voice tight with stress. "I've reviewed certain documents that concern me. The Northbridge terms?" "Yes." "There seem to be aspects that weren't fully explained to the board." Dr. Brooks looked at Adrian, who nodded grimly. "Ms. Crane, I'm calling for an emergency board meeting before any signatures are finalized with Northbridge. That would be highly irregular. Preston has scheduled the signing for this afternoon, then scheduled a meeting for this morning, unless you're comfortable explaining to shareholders why you approved the liquidation of their company without proper review. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Dr. Brooks could hear papers shuffling and what sounded like someone pacing. Finally, Eleanor spoke. Emergency board session, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. But Dr. Brooks, if you disrupt this process without cause, the liability will be enormous. Ms. Crane, if you sign that Northbridge agreement without understanding what it really says, the liability will be much worse. The call ended. Adrian looked at Dr. Brooks with a mixture of hope and fear. You think we can stop this? Dr. Brooks folded the Northbridge terms and handed them back to him. We're not stopping anything, Adrian. We're going to let them stop themselves. Preston's phone buzzed at 4:47 in the morning. The caller ID showed Eleanor Crane. He answered on the first ring, already knowing what she would say. There's an emergency board meeting scheduled for 8 o'clock this morning, Eleanor said without greeting. Dr. Brooks requested it. Preston sat up in his king-sized bed, fury spreading through his chest like acid. You approved it? The Northbridge terms raised questions I couldn't ignore. If we sign that agreement without proper... Eleanor, listen carefully. Dr. Brooks is not our savior. She's a predator using that lobby incident to manipulate this board into handing her control of my company. Preston, the terms show massive layoffs and patent transfers. How do you explain? I explain it by winning this war before 8 o'clock. He hung up and immediately called his director of communications. Wake up the crisis team, Preston ordered. We're going nuclear. By 6 o'clock, his communications director had assembled Preston's inner circle in the executive conference room. Coffee cups and laptops cluttered the polished table while Preston paced near the windows overlooking the awakening city. Show them the edited footage, Preston commanded. The communications director pulled up the security video on the main screen. The clip began with Dr. Brooks approaching the front desk, but Preston's contemptuous remarks had been removed. Instead, viewers saw Dr. Brooks speaking firmly to Paige, then walking toward the executive elevators without permission. When Preston appeared on screen, his dialogue had been replaced with audio from later in the confrontation, making it sound like he was responding to Dr. Brooks's aggression rather than initiating it. This makes her look like she was trying to force her way upstairs, the communications director explained. We removed the part where she identified herself and added captions suggesting she refused to provide credentials. Perfect. Release it immediately to every financial news outlet, every business blogger, every corporate security forum. What's the narrative? Preston smiled coldly. Aggressive investor disrupts private meeting, threatens company leadership, then claims discrimination when properly removed by security. The communications director nodded and began typing on his laptop. What about the complaint? Already drafted. Preston handed him a folder. We're filing formal complaints with the SEC and state regulators accusing Brooks Equity Partners of attempted coercion, market manipulation, and using false discrimination claims to force hostile takeover terms. The room went quiet. Even the communications director looked uncomfortable. Sir, that could destroy her firm's reputation permanently. That's the point. She humiliated me in front of my employees. Now, I'm going to teach her what real power looks like. By 7:30, the edited footage was trending on financial Twitter. Business reporters shared clips with captions like, "Investor meltdown caught on camera." And when corporate meetings go wrong, Preston's phone rang constantly with congratulatory calls from other CEOs praising him for standing firm against activist investor intimidation. But the real devastation came through official channels. Adrian received a suspension notice via email, effective immediately. The message cited unauthorized disclosure of confidential information to external parties and potential breach of fiduciary duty. Maya's termination became official that morning. HR cited violation of confidentiality agreements and disruptive behavior threatening workplace harmony. Theo was placed on administrative leave pending investigation after refusing to sign an amended statement claiming Dr. Brooks had been verbally aggressive and uncooperative with security protocols. By noon, 3 board members had called Eleanor demanding the emergency meeting be canceled, fearing regulatory scrutiny from the SEC complaint. "We cannot appear to be collaborating with someone under federal investigation," board member Patricia Williams told Eleanor over speakerphone. "The optics are toxic," agreed board member Robert Hayes. "If we meet with her now, it looks like we're being coerced." Eleanor had no choice. She called Dr. Brooks personally to cancel the meeting. "Dr. Brooks, given the regulatory complaints filed this morning, the board feels it would be inappropriate to." "I understand," Dr. Brooks said quietly. "When will Northbridge sign?" "Tomorrow morning at headquarters." Preston moved up the timeline. The call ended without pleasantries. Preston stood in his office that afternoon watching the edited footage play on 3 different news channels simultaneously. His assistant brought him champagne to celebrate. "Sir, your 2 o'clock is here," she said. "Cancel it. I want to watch this." On screen, a business analyst was explaining how Dr. Brooks's aggressive tactics represented everything wrong with modern activist investing. Preston's phone buzzed with a text from his communications director. "Brooks's partners are pressuring her to withdraw. 3 major pension funds pulled preliminary interest from her next fundraise. Perfect." That evening, Dr. Brooks sat alone in her hotel suite, laptop open on the coffee table. The edited footage played on her screen for the 15th time. She watched herself appear confrontational, demanding, unreasonable. The truth had been surgically removed and replaced with Preston's version of reality. Her phone showed missed calls from worried partners, concerned investors, and reporters wanting statements. Her firm's reputation was hemorrhaging in real time. For the first time since entering that lobby, Dr. Brooks looked tired. Then her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I have the whole truth. T." Dr. Brooks stared at the message, her pulse quickening slightly. She typed back, "When can we meet?" The response came immediately. "Now." The Crossroads. The diner sat nearly empty at 10:30 that night, its neon sign flickering against the Chicago drizzle. Dr. Brooks slid into a corner booth, her back to the wall, watching the door. The waitress barely looked up from her magazine. Theo entered 5 minutes later, still wearing his security uniform under a dark jacket. He moved carefully, scanning the room before approaching her table. His face carried the weight of a man who had not slept. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Brooks said softly. Theo sat across from her, his hands clasped tightly on the scratched Formica table. "I should have done this sooner." The waitress shuffled over with coffee neither of them had ordered. They waited until she was gone before speaking. "The footage they released," Theo began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not complete." Dr. Brooks leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" "My body camera was recording the whole time." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. "Department policy. All interactions get recorded for liability protection. But management only pulled the main security feed for their edit." Dr. Brooks's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression calm. "What does your camera show?" "Everything." Theo met her eyes. "You telling the receptionist your name? You saying you had an appointment? You staying calm when Mr. Hale started yelling? Him calling you a liar? Him telling me to treat you like a threat?" He paused, swallowing hard. "It shows me hesitating because I knew something wasn't right, and it shows Mr. Shaw running out screaming that you were the investor." The diner's fluorescent lights hummed above them. Outside, a car splashed through a puddle. "Why didn't you come forward before?" Dr. Brooks asked, without judgment. Theo's jaw tightened. "Because they threatened my pension. Because my wife just had surgery, and we need the insurance. Because I'm 52 years old, and good security jobs don't grow on trees." He looked down at his hands. "I was going to stay quiet. Sign their statement. Keep my head down like I've done my whole career. What changed?" "Maya." His voice hardened. Watching them fire that young woman for telling the truth, watching her walk out of that building with a cardboard box while everyone stared, just like they stared at you. Dr. Brooks felt something shift in her chest. She didn't deserve that. Neither did you. Theo looked up. I've been security for 23 years. Military police before that. I know the difference between someone causing trouble and someone being targeted. You were targeted from the moment you walked in. The door chimed softly as two more figures entered. Nadine Porter moved with purpose, her briefcase in hand, followed by Maya Ellison. Maya looked older than her 29 years, her professional composure strained but intact. They slid into the booth beside Dr. Brooks. Nadine nodded to Theo respectfully. Ms. Ellison has preserved critical evidence through her legal counsel, Nadine said quietly. We need to coordinate before moving forward. Maya placed a folder on the table. Before they locked me out completely, I forwarded everything to my attorney. Emails showing Mr. Hale knew a major investor named Brooks was coming. Messages where he joked about some desperate money trying to buy in. Instructions to his staff after the lobby incident. She opened the folder carefully. This one came 6 hours after you left the building. Dr. Brooks read the printed email. Preston's message to his inner circle was brief and brutal. The Brooks situation needs to disappear, find leverage, discredit her firm, make this problem go away before Monday's market open. He didn't hide it, Maya said. He thought he was untouchable. Nadine's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and looked up. Mr. Shaw is joining us securely. She opened her laptop and connected to an encrypted video call. Adrian's face appeared on screen, tired but determined. Behind him was what looked like his home office. Dr. Brooks, Adrian said, I have the financial records you need. Northbridge isn't just connected to the Shell contracts. It is the Shell contracts. The same numbered accounts, the same signatory authorizations. Preston has been funneling company money to himself through Northbridge for 8 months. Dr. Brooks felt the pieces clicking together. So when Northbridge rescues the company, he gets paid twice, Adrian finished. Once through the fraudulent contracts and again through the acquisition fees. Meanwhile, Northbridge strips the patents, fires half the workforce, and leaves the company worthless. The booth fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerated display case. Dr. Brooks looked at each face around the table. 3 people who had risked their careers to preserve the truth. 3 witnesses who refused to let injustice hide behind corporate polish. We're not leaking this anonymously, she said quietly. We're walking back in there tomorrow morning and showing everyone exactly what they tried to cover up. Maya nodded firmly. Theo straightened his shoulders. Adrian's image flickered, but his expression remained resolute. Nadine opened her briefcase and began removing documents. Then we do this correctly. Full evidence packets to the board, outside counsel, the forensic auditors, and federal investigators. Everything documented, everything admissible. Dr. Brooks pulled out her phone and began typing. The first message went to Eleanor Crane, sent at exactly 11:47 at night. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 9 o'clock in the morning. New evidence requires immediate review before Northbridge signing. This is not a request. She copied the message to every board member, outside counsel, and the lead auditor. Then she composed a second message to Preston Hale himself. See you in the morning. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Dr. Brooks stepped through the same glass doors where her humiliation had begun days earlier. This time she carried a leather portfolio containing evidence that would destroy the man who had tried to erase her. Employees gathered near the marble columns, whispering. Word had spread that something major was happening. Paige Naylor looked up from the reception desk with nervous recognition. Theo stood at his security post, meeting Dr. Brooks' eyes with a slight nod. Dr. Brooks walked directly to the executive elevator without stopping. The boardroom on the 32nd floor buzzed with tense energy. Directors sat stiffly around the polished conference table. Eleanor Crane shuffled papers at the head, her usual composure cracked. Adrian Shaw sat pale but resolute near the windows. Preston paced behind his chair like a trapped animal. "This is outrageous," he snapped as Dr. Brooks entered with Nadine Porter. "Eleanor, you're letting a hostile investor disrupt our Northbridge signing with conspiracy theories." Dr. Brooks set her portfolio on the table without responding. Eleanor cleared her throat. "The board received evidence packets this morning that require immediate review." "Fabricated evidence," Preston shot back. "She's desperate because we found better financing." "Then you won't mind us examining the truth," Dr. Brooks said quietly. Preston pointed at her with fury. "I want her removed. She has no standing here. Security should escort her out just like before." The reference to the lobby incident hung in the air like poison. Eleanor's voice hardened. "Mr. Hale, Dr. Brooks is still our potential investor. She will present her concerns." Preston's face flushed red. "I'm the CEO of this company." "For now," Eleanor replied coldly. Dr. Brooks connected her laptop to the conference room screen. "Let's start with what really happened in your lobby." She pressed play. Theo's body camera footage filled the wall-mounted display, crystal clear audio and video from his chest level. The directors watched Dr. Brooks approach the reception desk calmly. They heard her identify herself politely. They saw Preston enter with his executives, scan the lobby, and zero in on her with immediate suspicion. "Can I help you?" his recorded voice asked with barely concealed hostility. "I'm here for the investor meeting." The board watched Preston laugh dismissively. They heard him cut her off when she gave her name. They saw him gesture toward security while employees gathered to stare. "I don't know who you think you are, but you're not walking into my building pretending to be important." Director Patricia Wells covered her mouth in shock. Board member Marcus Chen shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The footage continued as Preston ordered Dr. Brooks detained as Theo reluctantly complied as Adrian burst from the elevator screaming her identity. The recording captured every humiliating second that Preston's edited version had hidden. When it ended, the boardroom sat in stunned silence. "That's what your CEO did to the woman who came to save your company," Dr. Brooks said simply. Preston's voice cracked with rage. Security procedures require what?" Dr. Brooks interrupted. "Assuming black women don't belong in your lobby? Ordering detention without asking questions? Lying to investigators afterward?" Maya stepped forward from where she'd been standing quietly near the door. The lobby incident wasn't isolated. "May I read from internal communications?" Eleanor nodded grimly. Maya opened her folder with steady hands. "Email from Preston Hale to senior staff, sent 2 weeks before Dr. Brooks's arrival. Some investor named Brooks is supposed to visit. Probably desperate money trying to buy credibility. Keep the meeting short." Several directors exchanged horrified glances. Email sent 6 hours after the lobby confrontation. "The Brooks situation needs to disappear. Find leverage, discredit her firm, make this problem go away before Monday's market open." Maya's voice grew stronger. "Email to HR regarding my termination. Maya Ellison showed poor judgment by speaking with unauthorized persons. Recommend immediate separation to prevent further security risks." She looked directly at Preston. "He fired me for telling the truth about what I witnessed." Adrian stood slowly. "The financial evidence is equally damning. He activated his own laptop, displaying spreadsheets and bank records. Northbridge Capital routes payments through the same accounts as our inflated vendor contracts, same routing numbers, same authorization signatures. Preston has been stealing from this company for 8 months. The numbers filled the screen. Consulting fees to shell companies, equipment purchases that never arrived, emergency loans that disappeared into private accounts. "The Northbridge deal isn't a rescue," Adrian continued. "It's the final theft. They acquire our patents for pennies, fire thousands of workers, and award Preston a $40 million exit package for orchestrating the sale." Preston exploded. "You're all traitors. Adrian, I trusted you." Eleanor, this woman is trying to steal my company. Your company? Nadine Porter spoke for the first time, her attorney's voice cutting through his hysteria. Mr. Hale, federal investigators are already in this building. Evidence preservation notices have been served on IT, HR, and accounting. Your personal devices were seized 1 hour ago. Preston's face went white. You can't. We can and we did, Nadine continued. Wire fraud, embezzlement, and civil rights violations carry serious federal penalties. Eleanor stood at the head of the table, her hands shaking slightly, but her voice firm. The board has a fiduciary duty to protect this company and its stakeholders. Eleanor, don't do this, Preston said, his tone shifting to desperate pleading. I built this company. I made you rich. You can't let them destroy me. You destroyed yourself, Eleanor replied. I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in CEO Preston Hale. Preston stepped toward her, his voice turning menacing. You think you can betray me? I have dirt on half this board. I'll burn everything down before I let you. Mr. Hale, Eleanor interrupted, steel in her voice. Sit down or security will escort you out. The threat hung in the boardroom air like a blade, all in favor of removing Preston Hale as chief executive officer, effective immediately. Every hand around the table rose without hesitation. The vote is unanimous, Eleanor announced. Mr. Hale, you are no longer CEO of Meridian Technologies. Preston stood frozen at the head of the boardroom table, his face flushed red with rage and disbelief. The unanimous vote echoed in the silence like a death sentence. Outside counsel approached him with practiced efficiency. Mr. Hale, I need your company phone, laptop, access badge, and any other corporate property in your possession. No. Preston's voice cracked. This is my company. I built it from nothing. You can't just take everything I've worked for. The lawyer extended his hand patiently. Sir, these items belong to Meridian Technologies, not to you personally. Please hand them over. Preston clutched his phone tighter. I won't do it. This is theft, corporate sabotage. I'll sue every one of you. Eleanor's voice cut through his desperation like ice. Preston, Meridian Technologies belongs to its shareholders, its employees, the patients who depend on our healthcare platforms, and the law. It never belonged to you alone. I made you people rich, Preston screamed, pointing at the board members. Without me, this company would be nothing. You'd all be nothing. Without us, Eleanor replied coldly, you'd still be selling insurance in your father's strip mall office. The door opened, and 2 federal investigators stepped into the boardroom. Both wore dark suits and carried badges that gleamed under the conference room lights. Mr. Hale, the lead investigator said calmly, please do not leave this building without speaking with us first. We have questions regarding financial irregularities and potential civil rights violations. Preston's face went pale. I want my lawyer. That's your right, the investigator nodded. But you're not leaving until we're finished. The second investigator looked at outside counsel. We'll need those corporate devices preserved as evidence. Chain of custody protocols apply immediately. Preston finally surrendered his phone and laptop, his hands shaking with fury. He ripped off his access badge and threw it onto the mahogany table. Fine. Take it all. But this isn't over. Eleanor pressed a button on the conference phone. Security to the executive boardroom immediately. Minutes later, the door opened again. Theo Grant entered, flanked by 2 other security officers. But this time, Theo walked with calm authority. His uniform crisp, his bearing professional and unshakable. Mr. Hale, Theo said evenly, please come with us. Preston stared at him with pure hatred. You? You're going to escort me out? After everything I did for you? I gave you a job when no one else would hire an ex-soldier. Theo met his gaze without flinching. You gave me a job, sir. But you also ordered me to put my hands on an innocent woman. Those aren't the same thing. She was trespassing. No, sir, Theo replied quietly. She was invited. You just didn't want to listen. The investigators flanked Preston as Theo led the procession out of the boardroom. They walked down the same executive hallway where Maya had been fired, past the same elevator where Adrian had frantically run to save Dr. Brooks, toward the same lobby where everything had started. Employees gathered along the marble columns just as they had days earlier, but this time they watched their former CEO being escorted out in disgrace. Phones lifted to record the moment. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Paige sat behind the front desk, her eyes lowered in shame. She remembered checking her computer system, finding no appointment, treating Dr. Brooks like she was lost. Now she understood what she had helped happen. Maya stood near the executive elevators, no longer afraid to be seen, no longer worried about retaliation. She watched Preston pass with steady eyes. Dr. Brooks remained near the marble pillars where she had been grabbed days ago. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply observed justice taking its course. Preston tried to glare at Theo as they approached the front doors. "You think you're a hero? You're just another security guard who follows orders." Theo paused for a moment, his voice carrying across the lobby. "Sometimes the most important order is the one you refuse to follow." The heavy glass doors opened. Federal investigators guided Preston toward the waiting cars outside, the same doors where he had ordered Dr. Brooks to be dragged out, now framed his own exit. As Preston disappeared into the Chicago morning, Dr. Brooks spoke quietly, her words carrying in the marble silence. "Truth has a memory, even when powerful men forget." Later that afternoon, the boardroom felt different. The same mahogany table, the same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago skyline, but the tension had shifted from desperation to possibility. Dr. Brooks sat across from Eleanor Crane, who looked older than she had that morning. Adrian Shaw occupied the chair where Preston had commanded just hours before, his shoulders straighter, but his expression humble. Maya Ellison sat at the table for the first time, no longer relegated to taking notes from the corner. Theo Grant stood near the door in his security uniform, present not as muscle, but as a witness to change. Nadine Porter had her legal documents spread before her. Outside counsel sat quietly, ready to formalize whatever agreement emerged. "The $340 million remains available," Dr. Brooks began, her voice steady. "But not under the same terms we discussed days ago." Eleanor nodded carefully. "What are your conditions?" Dr. Brooks opened her leather portfolio. "First, this company will establish an independent ethics office with full authority to investigate complaints, review executive decisions, and report directly to the board. No more buried reports, no more disappeared complaints." She looked at Maya. "Second, Ms. Ellison will be reinstated immediately and promoted to Vice President of Ethics and Employee Accountability. Her salary will reflect that position, and she will have direct access to all personnel files, executive communications, and company policies." Maya's eyes widened. Adrian nodded his approval. Eleanor made notes on her tablet. "Third," Dr. Brooks continued, "every executive who participated in retaliation, discrimination, or financial misconduct will be removed within 30 days. No golden parachutes, no quiet resignations, public accountability." Eleanor's pen stopped moving. "That could include several senior staff members." "Then you should have chosen better senior staff," Dr. Brooks replied without sympathy. "Fourth, this company will create the Brooks Access Fund, named for my father, David Brooks. It will provide healthcare technology and medical equipment to underserved communities. 5% of annual profits will fund this program." The room was silent. Adrian leaned forward. "Dr. Brooks, that's significant. My father died because he couldn't afford the medical care he needed after 30 years of cleaning offices owned by men who never learned his name," Dr. Brooks said quietly. "This company will not repeat that indifference." She turned to Theo. "Fifth, Mr. Grant will become Director of Security Standards. He will retrain the entire security department on dignity, bias prevention, and lawful conduct." Never again will this lobby be a place where assumptions determine how people are treated. Theo straightened, surprise and gratitude crossing his face. Sixth, Dr. Brooks continued, employees will have representation on the company oversight committee. Workers who built this company deserve a voice in how it operates. Eleanor set down her pen. And if we agree to these terms, then Meridian survives. Thousands of people keep their jobs. Hospitals keep their software. Patients keep their care. The alternative is bankruptcy, liquidation, and failure. Adrian cleared his throat. Before we proceed, I need to say something publicly. He looked directly at the outside counsel. My silence helped Preston's culture survive. I knew complaints were being ignored. I saw employees being pushed out. I did nothing because I was afraid for my own position. The room held its breath. I'm not making excuses, Adrian continued. Fear is not a defense for allowing injustice. If this board appoints me interim CEO, I will work every day to earn the trust I failed to protect. Eleanor studied him carefully. That's quite an admission, Adrian. It's the truth, he replied. And this company has had enough lies. Nadine spoke for the first time. The documents are ready for signature if the board approves these terms. Eleanor looked around the table. The other directors who had joined by video conference nodded their agreement one by one. All in favor of accepting Dr. Brooks's investment terms. Every hand rose. Dr. Brooks signed the investment agreement with the same pen she had carried into the building days earlier. But now the signatures meant something different. They meant accountability. They meant change. 3 weeks later, Dr. Brooks stepped through the glass doors of Meridian Technologies carrying a simple leather briefcase instead of rescue documents. The lobby looked the same, but everything felt different. Good morning, Dr. Brooks, Paige said from behind the front desk, her voice warm and respectful. Mr. Shaw is expecting you in conference room B. Thank you, Paige. Near the marble pillars where employees had once gathered to watch her humiliation, a small bronze plaque now hung on the wall. The Brooks Access Fund, expanding healthcare with dignity. In memory of David Brooks, 1943 to 2019. Dr. Brooks paused before it, remembering her father's calloused hands and quiet strength. Dr. Brooks? Maya approached from the elevator bank wearing a navy blazer with a new confidence in her stride. I'm heading upstairs to lead the new employee ethics training. Would you like to observe? I'd be honored. They rode the elevator together. The same car where Adrian had frantically explained the confidential appointment system. Now, Maya carried a tablet full of policy reforms and training materials. In the conference room, Adrian presented quarterly reports with cautious optimism. The company had stabilized. Stock prices had recovered after the leadership change. The Patient Access Fund had already provided medical equipment to 4 community clinics. The ethics office has processed 12 complaints in 3 weeks, Maya reported. All were investigated fully. 3 resulted in management changes. Employees are starting to trust the system. Theo appeared in the doorway. Dr. Brooks, there's a family in the lobby asking for a tour. A grandmother and her granddaughter. The little girl heard about the company from a news story. Dr. Brooks smiled. Let's go meet them. Back in the lobby, a black woman in her 70s stood with a girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The child stared at the bronze plaque with wide, curious eyes. Are you the lady from the television? The grandmother asked Dr. Brooks gently. I might be. The little girl looked up at Dr. Brooks with complete directness. My grandma says you made the mean man go away. Are you the one who owns this place now? Dr. Brooks knelt down to the child's eye level, her voice soft but clear. No, sweetheart. I'm the woman who reminded them these doors were never meant for only one kind of person. This story reminds us that every choice we make carries weight, especially when power is in our hands. It shows how easy it is to judge someone by what we see on the surface, and how costly that mistake can be. But it also shows the quiet strength of those who refuse to stay silent when they see injustice. even when speaking up puts everything at risk. In the end, real leadership isn't about protecting your own image or position. It's about creating space where everyone is treated with dignity, where truth can surface, and where the most vulnerable have a voice. May we all remember to listen before we judge, to stand up when it matters, and to build a world where no one has to prove they belong. Because when we choose kindness, accountability, and respect, we don't just change companies or boardrooms, we change lives, including our own. And that is a legacy worth fighting for. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.